Just want to introduce everybody so everybody knows who we're talking to. Jeannie Zaino is here. She's a professor of political science at Iona College, professor of campaign management at NYU. Thanks for being here. Dominic is here. Scott Levenson is the founder and president of Advanced Group, the strategic consultants. Back to him in 1 second. And Mayo Bartlett, just to his right, is an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett, PLLC, former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. Scott, you had something to say?
I mean, not that I want to invalidate anything that we've been talking about, because these are real issues, but I feel like this news story has been driven by good film.
Clearly.
And that there's nothing necessarily unique about this story. We've been talking about instances like this since Kitty Genovese wasn't reported going 60, 70 years ago, where the sensationalism of people watching and not calling the police was made into national news.
But Scott, it's not just about watching. It's about the action of those young ladies.
And I'm suggesting
that young lady was standing there in her bra.
I don't know where you grew up,
and didn't see.
I don't know
you know
where
I grew up in the projects.
So what I'm saying, how many times have you seen 5-on-1 gang fights?
And I think we should speak out about it every time it happens.
We should, but that doesn't mean that this particular situation is so unique from your experience or my experience that we should stigmatize an entire community, because what's happened there is so different than what happens all over the place. Because where I grew up in Bayside, Queens, if I crossed 35th, was supposed to recognize that the problem is global, that the problem isn't plaguing one community.
So are we supposed to give these young ladies a pass?
The problem, no, what we're supposed to recognize is that violence is throughout communities, is regardless of class, is regardless of race. And that's the issue we should be talking about. Not about these girls as if there's a unique situation of a 5-on-1 gang fight here, because when I grew up in Bayside, Queens, every time I crossed 35th Avenue, I faced the same thing. It's nothing unique about this. That's all I'm saying. That's shameful.
I think it's very unique, and I think it's a reflection of all the bad things.
What I'm saying is what's unique is the good film.
I could care less about the good film.
Yeah, but I think the medium cares a lot about it.
The medium cares about the film. But it's very bad in terms of what's going on with our young people. That's my point.
Youth, it's a problem.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And I think to Scott's point, had there not been the video of it, I mean, there were probably 100 other similar incidents around the nation that happened within a couple of days of that one in Brooklyn. Had it not been for the film, had it not been for the video, we might not have seen it. I have a different question about Sharpton and the Sharptons and the National Action Network, because one of the big criticisms that you get is that if it's a black community victimized issue, they'll be there and they'll be vocal and they'll be leading the charge. But if it's the other way around, if it's a white victim and a black attacker, you might not necessarily get the same level of involvement. And is that a fair criticism? And do you think that bears out from what you've seen, Mayo?
I'm not sure that it's a fair criticism, because a lot of times it depends on what the media chooses to cover. So we've had situations and cases I've been involved with where we're very vocal with respect to one matter and it gets much more attention than with respect to another. For instance, when we talk about police brutality, we talk about it across the board. We look at cases that happen in New Hampshire where all the players are white. It's a systemic issue. It's not an issue, as you said before, it's not an us versus them. And that same thing happens. And even to go back to your point about Kitty Genovese, it probably was easier to get involved there because people were in their apartments watching one person assail her. Here you're in a restaurant and it's difficult to even know who's involved. So it's you against 10 or 12 people, but that happens in every community also. It's simply that if it's not on video, we tend not to talk about it. If Mr. Garner's case wasn't on video, we wouldn't be talking about Mr. Garner.
And I think we often skew the definition of prejudice with the definition of racism. And one of the things the National Action Network does well is call attention to systemic racism in our society. That only exists when you're in a black on white or a black on some other racial situation that is a dominant race. That's just what the definition of racism is.
Andrew, I would also say, though, the National Action Network doesn't bring attention to every case, because they're going to focus on the cases that they're handling. There are lots of cases where black people are victims and you don't hear the National Action Network, or perhaps the National Action Network makes a comment but it's not nationally picked up.
And we're going to leave it there for this segment.